A police dog runs toward a girl's car seat, and when he reveals what's under it, a mother screams. But this isn't just another heartwarming dog story. What was hidden beneath that car seat was a danger so terrifyingly close, so devastatingly real, that it shatters everything you thought you knew about keeping your children safe. In the next few minutes, you're about to witness a moment that will shake you to your core, because this could have happened to any of us. Stay with us as we uncover exactly what that heroic dog discovered, and why a mother's scream of terror became a scream of gratitude. It was Tuesday morning, and Sarah had done everything right. The alarm on her phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes before she actually needed to wake up. That was intentional. Sarah had learned years ago that those 13 minutes made all the difference between a chaotic morning and a controlled one. She opened her eyes in the semi-darkness of her bedroom, took a deep breath, and allowed herself a moment of stillness before the day demanded everything from her. Her husband, Michael, was already gone. He had an early meeting downtown. The house was quiet in that particular way that only happens before a 3-year-old wakes up. Sarah cherished these moments. She moved through her morning routine with practiced precision. Shower, coffee, getting dressed in the clothes she'd laid out the night before. No decisions, no friction, just flow. By 7:15 a.m., she heard the first sounds from Emma's room. Not a cry, but that sweet, groggy murmuring that meant her daughter was beginning to wake. Sarah smiled. This was her favorite part of the day. She walked down the hallway, pushed open Emma's door gently, and there she was, her 3-year-old tangled in her pink blanket, rubbing her eyes with her tiny fists. "Good morning, baby," Sarah whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed. Emma's face transformed. Her eyes went wide and a smile spread across her face that could have powered a small city. She threw her arms around Sarah's neck, and for a moment, nothing else in the world mattered. Not the emails waiting on her phone, not the errands she needed to run, not the bills or the worries or the endless list of things that needed doing. There was only this: her daughter's warmth, her innocent joy, the weight of her small body against Sarah's chest. "Mommy, you're awake," Emma said, as if Sarah's consciousness was the most surprising and wonderful thing that had ever happened. "I'm awake, sweetheart. Ready for breakfast?" They went downstairs together, Emma in her pajamas, Sarah already mentally preparing the day. Cereal with sliced bananas, Emma's favorite. Orange juice in the special cup with the handles. Sarah sat across from her daughter at the kitchen table, watching her eat, and felt that deep, bone-level satisfaction that comes from knowing your child is safe, fed, and happy. This was what Sarah had built her life around. Safety, routine, control. She had grown up in chaos. Her mother had been unpredictable, her father absent, and her childhood had been a series of surprises, none of them good. As an adult, Sarah had sworn to herself that her life would be different. Her home would be different. Her children would grow up in a world where things made sense, where routines were kept, where danger was anticipated and prevented. And for 3 years, it had worked. Emma was thriving. She was happy, confident, and secure. Michael had a good job. They lived in a safe neighborhood in the suburbs, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and children played in yards without fear. Sarah volunteered at Emma's preschool. She knew the teachers, the other parents, the staff. She had built a community around her daughter, a protective circle of known quantities and managed risks. By 8:30 a.m., Emma was dressed in her favorite outfit, a purple dress with flowers on it. Sarah had brushed her hair and put it in 2 neat pigtails. Emma looked like a picture from a children's book, innocent, cherished, perfectly loved. "We're going to the shopping center today, remember?" Sarah said, helping Emma into her car seat. "We need to get you some new shoes because your feet are growing so fast." "Yay!" Emma clapped her hands. "And can we get ice cream?" "Maybe," Sarah said, securing the straps of the car seat with practiced efficiency. Click, click, check. She always checked twice. Safety was not something to be casual about. She stepped back and examined her work. The car seat was positioned perfectly. At the correct angle, the straps were snug but not too tight, and Emma was comfortable and secure. Sarah had read all the safety guides. She had watched the videos. She had practiced the installation multiple times. This car seat had been chosen after hours of research. Everything about Emma's transportation was deliberate and careful. Sarah walked around to the driver's side and slid behind the wheel. Emma was singing to herself in the back seat, some half-remembered song from her preschool. Sarah smiled as she started the engine. This was her life now. Carpools and shopping trips, preschool pickups and bedtime stories. It was smaller than the life she'd imagined as a teenager, but it was infinitely richer. The drive to the shopping center took about 15 minutes. Sarah knew the route by heart. She knew which traffic lights were usually red, which turns were coming up, which radio station played the least annoying songs. She had optimized even this. Emma chattered the entire way, pointing out cars and dogs and clouds that looked like animals. "Mommy, that cloud looks like a bunny." "It does, sweetie." "Good eyes." Sarah felt that familiar warm glow in her chest. This was what mattered. This moment, this connection, this perfect, ordinary Tuesday morning with her daughter. The shopping center was moderately busy when they arrived, not crowded, but not empty either. Sarah pulled into a spot relatively close to the entrance, in a well-lit area where she could see her car from inside the store. She had chosen this spot deliberately. Good visibility. Close to the entrance. Safe. She turned off the engine and turned around to look at Emma. "Okay, baby. We're going to go inside for just a little bit. We'll get your new shoes, and then we'll come right back to the car. Sound good?" "Sound good," Emma echoed, already unbuckling herself from her car seat, or trying to. Sarah reached back and helped her, lifting her out and setting her on her hip. Emma wrapped her arms around Sarah's neck, and they headed toward the store entrance. The shopping center had that particular smell of retail spaces everywhere, a mixture of new merchandise, cleaning products, and the faint aroma of the food court in the distance. Sarah navigated through the automatic doors, Emma on her hip, mentally calculating how long this would take. 20 minutes, maybe 30 if Emma was indecisive about shoe colors. The shoe store was bright and organized. Sarah set Emma down and let her walk around, looking at the displays. Emma was drawn immediately to a pair of light-up sneakers with unicorns on them. "These ones, Mommy, these are so pretty." Sarah knelt down and examined the shoes. They were well made from a reputable brand. The size looked right. She helped Emma try them on, and they fit perfectly. Emma stood up and took a few experimental steps, watching the lights flash with each footfall. "Perfect," Sarah said. "We'll take these." As she stood in line to pay, Sarah felt a small flutter of something in her chest. Not quite anxiety, but not quite comfort either. A tiny, almost imperceptible unease. She looked around the store, trying to identify what had triggered it. Everything looked normal. Mothers shopping with their children, store employees restocking shelves. Nothing out of place. Sarah dismissed the feeling. She was always a little anxious. It came with the territory of being a protective parent. This was just her hypervigilance doing its job. There was nothing wrong. Everything was fine. She paid for the shoes, and the cashier put them in a bag. Emma held the bag proudly as they walked back toward the exit. "Can we get ice cream now?" Emma asked hopefully. Sarah checked her phone. It was 9:47 a.m. She had time. "Sure, baby. Let's get ice cream." They headed toward the food court, Emma swinging the shoe bag as she walked. Sarah felt that flutter again, that tiny, nagging sense that something wasn't quite right. But she pushed it down. This was her anxiety talking, nothing more. She was a good mother. She had done everything right. She had planned, prepared, and protected. What could possibly go wrong? They got ice cream, vanilla for Emma, a small coffee for Sarah, and sat at one of the tables in the food court. Emma licked her ice cream cone, and Sarah watched her, committing the moment to memory. These were the moments that mattered. These were the moments that made life worth living. After they finished, Sarah cleaned Emma's face and hands with a napkin, threw away their trash, and they headed back toward the parking lot. The sun was bright and warm. It was shaping up to be a beautiful day. Sarah felt that familiar sense of satisfaction that comes from a well-executed plan. They had gone to the store, gotten the shoes, and had a nice treat. Everything had gone smoothly. They reached the car. Sarah unlocked it with her key fob and opened the back door. She helped Emma into her car seat, securing the straps once again with careful precision. Click, click, check. Everything was exactly as it should be. Sarah closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. She was just reaching for the door handle when she noticed something. A police officer with a dog was walking through the parking lot. The dog was a German Shepherd, large and alert, with the distinctive vest of a K9 unit. The officer was in full uniform, and the dog was on a leash, but it was pulling with intensity, its nose working the air. Sarah watched for a moment, curious. She had seen police dogs before. They were common enough in the suburbs. But something about this one was different. The dog's behavior seemed urgent, almost frantic. Its handler was looking around, trying to determine what had caught the dog's attention. Sarah felt that flutter in her chest again, stronger this time. But she pushed it away. She had a daughter waiting in the car. She had errands to run. She didn't have time to stand in the parking lot watching police dogs. She opened the car door and was about to slide behind the wheel when she heard the officer call out, Ma'am, can I speak with you for a moment?" Sarah froze. The officer was walking toward her, the dog still pulling urgently at its leash. The officer's face was serious, professional, but there was something in his eyes that made Sarah's stomach clench. "Yes?" Sarah said, her voice suddenly smaller than it had been a moment before. "Is this your vehicle?" the officer asked. "Yes, it is. Why? What's wrong?" The officer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the dog, which was now circling the car, its nose working frantically around the undercarriage. "My K9 unit is detecting something," the officer said carefully. "I'm going to need to inspect your vehicle." Sarah's mouth went dry. "Inspect it? For what? I don't understand." "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle for a moment." And in that instant, Sarah knew. She didn't know what exactly. She didn't know the specifics or the details. But somewhere in her body, in that deep place where mothers carry their most primal fears, she knew that something was terribly, catastrophically wrong. The perfect morning had just ended. But Sarah had no idea that someone was already watching and waiting. Sarah's heart began to pound in her chest as the officer approached with the German Shepherd. She could feel her palms starting to sweat, and she had to consciously remind herself to breathe. In the back seat, Emma was still singing softly to herself, oblivious to the sudden shift in the energy around them. "Officer, What exactly are you looking for?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is something wrong with my car?" The officer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he was watching his dog intently. The K9's behavior was becoming more and more frantic. Its nose was working overtime, sniffing around the perimeter of the vehicle with an intensity that suggested it had found something significant. "My name is Officer Martinez," the man said, finally making eye contact with Sarah. "And I need to ask you some questions. First, how long has this vehicle been parked here?" Sarah glanced at her phone. "Maybe 30 minutes? We came in to get my daughter some shoes and had ice cream. Why?" Officer Martinez's jaw tightened slightly. "And you haven't left the vehicle unattended at any other time this morning?" "No, we just arrived. We went straight inside." Sarah felt a cold finger of dread tracing down her spine. "Officer, you're scaring me. What is going on?" "Ma'am, I need you to step back from the vehicle, please, and keep your daughter inside for now." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, but something in Officer Martinez's tone made her comply. She stepped backward, putting distance between herself and the car. From inside, Emma's voice called out, "Mommy, where are you going?" "I'm right here, baby," Sarah called back, her voice tight. "Just stay in your seat, okay? Mommy's talking to this police officer." Officer Martinez was now crouching down, examining the underside of the vehicle. His dog was circling frantically, its leash taut as it pulled toward the rear of the car, specifically toward the area beneath where Emma's car seat was located. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. Whatever the dog had detected, it was near Emma. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, what is it? What did it find?" "Ma'am, I need you to remain calm," Officer Martinez said. But there was an urgency in his voice now that hadn't been there before. He was speaking into his radio, his words clipped and professional. "Dispatch, this is K9 Unit 7. I have a positive detection on a vehicle at the shopping center, requesting backup and—" "No, wait," Sarah interrupted, her voice rising. "You need to tell me what's happening. My daughter's in that car. My 3-year-old daughter is in that car." Officer Martinez's expression shifted. His eyes met Sarah's with a new intensity, a new concern. "Your daughter is in the vehicle?" "Yes, she's in her car seat. She's been in there the whole time we were inside. Officer, please, just tell me what's going on." "Ma'am, I need you to stay right here. Do not approach the vehicle, understand?" Sarah nodded, but she felt like she was moving through water. Everything suddenly slow and surreal. She could see Emma's face pressed against the window of the car, confused and starting to look worried. "Mommy?" Emma's small voice was muffled by the glass. "I want to get out." "I know, baby. Just one more minute, okay? Mommy's right here." But Mommy was not okay. Mommy's mind was racing through 1,000 terrible scenarios. Carbon monoxide? A gas leak? A bomb? No, that was crazy. This was a shopping center parking lot in the suburbs. Things like that didn't happen here. And yet, here was a police dog, trained to detect... What? What were K9 units trained to detect? Drugs, explosives, weapons. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Officer," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "is it a bomb? Is there a bomb under my car?" Officer Martinez didn't answer, which was answer enough. He was speaking into his radio again, using words like evacuation and perimeter and potential threat. Other officers were arriving now, their sirens wailing in the distance. The peaceful Tuesday morning had transformed into something else entirely, something dangerous and chaotic. More police cars pulled into the parking lot. Officers were beginning to cordon off the area, ushering other shoppers away from the vicinity of Sarah's vehicle. A small crowd was beginning to gather at a distance, people pointing and whispering, pulling out their phones to record. Sarah felt like she was standing outside her own body, watching this happen to someone else. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening to her, to them, to her perfect Tuesday morning. "Is my daughter in danger?" Sarah asked, her voice cracking. "Officer Martinez, is my daughter in danger?" "Ma'am, I need you to come with me," Officer Martinez said, gently taking her elbow. "We need to get you to a safe distance from the vehicle." "No." Sarah pulled away. "No, I'm not leaving my daughter." "Your daughter is safe inside the vehicle for now," Officer Martinez said, his voice firm but not unkind. "The best thing you can do for her right now is to comply with my instructions. We have trained professionals who are going to handle this situation. But I need you to move away from the vehicle. Now." Sarah wanted to fight. Every maternal instinct in her body was screaming at her to run to that car, to rip open the door, to grab Emma and hold her close. But she also understood, on some level, that Officer Martinez was right. If there was something dangerous under that car, the worst thing she could do was be near it. She allowed herself to be led away, her eyes still locked on the car where Emma sat, now crying and pressing her face against the window. "Mommy, Mommy, I'm scared." "I'm here, baby. Mommy's right here," Sarah called back, even though she wasn't, not really. She was being walked across the parking lot, away from her daughter, away from the car, toward a cluster of police vehicles. Officer Martinez positioned her behind one of the police cars, using it as a shield. Other officers were now surrounding Sarah's vehicle at a distance, keeping the growing crowd of onlookers back. A bomb detection unit was being set up. Sarah could see the specialized equipment and the officers in protective gear. This was real. This was actually happening. "How did this happen?" Sarah asked, her voice hollow. "How did something get under my car? I was with my car the whole time. I parked it, we went inside and—" "Ma'am, we don't know yet what we're dealing with," Officer Martinez said. "But I need you to answer some questions. Have you noticed anything unusual? Anyone approaching your vehicle? Any strange packages or items?" Sarah shook her head numbly. "No, nothing. I parked in a normal spot. I didn't see anyone near the car. I don't understand." "How long were you inside the store?" "Maybe 30 minutes. Less than an hour, definitely." Officer Martinez was writing things down in a small notebook. His radio crackled with voices, updates coming in from other units. Sarah caught fragments. Of securing the perimeter. Evacuating the shopping center. Bomb detection unit en route. Bomb detection unit. So it was a bomb. Or something that looked like a bomb. Or something that the dog had detected as potentially being a bomb. Sarah felt her legs go weak. She would have fallen if Officer Martinez hadn't steadied her. "I need to sit down," she whispered. "Here, come on." Officer Martinez guided her to the curb, and she sat down heavily. Her mind was spinning, unable to process what was happening. Emma was still crying in the car. Sarah could hear her small voice calling for her mother over and over again. The worst part, the absolute worst part, was the helplessness. Sarah had spent 3 years building a life of control and safety around her daughter. She had researched everything, planned everything, protected against every conceivable danger. And yet, here she was, completely powerless, unable to do anything but sit on a curb while her daughter sat alone in a car, frightened and confused. How had this happened? How had something dangerous gotten under her car without her knowing? Had someone deliberately placed it there? Was this random, or was she specifically targeted? The questions spiraled, each one more terrifying than the last. "Officer," Sarah said, her voice shaking, "why would someone put something under my car? Who would do this?" "That's what we're going to find out," Officer Martinez said. He didn't sound confident. More police vehicles arrived. The parking lot was now a scene of controlled chaos. Officers directing traffic, setting up barriers, establishing a perimeter. The shopping center itself was being evacuated. Sarah could see people streaming out of the stores, looking confused and alarmed, being herded away from the area by police officers. Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Michael. "Hey, how's shopping going? Emma happy with her shoes?" She couldn't respond. She couldn't. She even process the normalcy of the question. Michael didn't know. Michael was at work, going about his day, completely unaware that his wife and daughter were in the middle of what might be a genuine emergency. "Officer, I need to call my husband," Sarah said. "You can do that in a moment," Officer Martinez said. "But first, I need to ask you some more questions. Have you had any conflicts with anyone recently? Anyone who might want to hurt you or your family?" Sarah's mind raced through her life. Her neighbors, all friendly. Her co-workers. She was a part-time consultant, worked from home mostly. Emma's teachers, they adored her. Michael's family, no conflicts there. She couldn't think of a single person who would want to hurt her. "No," she said. "No one. I don't understand any of this." The bomb detection unit was now approaching the vehicle with their equipment. Sarah watched, her heart in her throat, as they began their work. The dog, Officer Martinez's K9 unit, was being held back, its job done. It had alerted. Now it was up to the specialists. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Sarah sat on the curb, numb and shaking, while police officers worked around her vehicle. Emma's cries had subsided into whimpers. Sarah could see her small silhouette in the window, and it broke her heart over and over again. Finally, after what must have been 20 minutes, but felt like an eternity, one of the officers in the protective gear approached Officer Martinez. They spoke in low voices, but Sarah could see the officer's expression shift from concern to something else, something darker. Officer Martinez turned to Sarah, and in that moment, Sarah knew that whatever was about to come next would change everything. "Ma'am?" Officer Martinez said, his voice careful and measured. "We need to talk about what's under your car seat." And then Sarah did something that would echo across that parking lot and change everything in an instant. Sarah's entire body went rigid. The words seemed to hang in the air between her and Officer Martinez, heavy with implication and dread. "What do you mean, under my car seat?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "What's under my car seat?" Officer Martinez exchanged a glance with another officer who had just approached. This one was older, with captain's insignia on his uniform. The captain placed a hand on Officer Martinez's shoulder and then turned his attention to Sarah. "Miss Sarah Chen?" the captain asked, consulting a small notebook. "Yes," Sarah said, her voice small and frightened. "That's me. What's going on? What did you find?" The captain sat down on the curb beside her, which somehow made everything feel more serious, more real. Police captains didn't sit down on curbs for routine traffic stops. "My name is Captain Richardson," he said, his voice grave but not unkind. "I need to ask you directly. Do you know what's under your car seat?" "No." Sarah's voice rose in pitch. "I don't know anything. I just parked my car and went inside with my daughter. There was nothing under the seat when I left the car. I know because I always check. I always make sure everything is secure and safe." Captain Richardson studied her face for a long moment. "Ms. Chen, I'm going to be direct with you. Our bomb detection unit has identified what appears to be a tracking device underneath your vehicle, positioned directly beneath where your daughter's car seat is located." Sarah's mind struggled to process the words. A tracking device? Like GPS? "Yes," Captain Richardson said. "But it's not a commercial GPS unit. This is a sophisticated piece of equipment, professional grade, the kind that someone would use if they were deliberately monitoring the movements of a specific vehicle." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Sarah gripped the edge of the curb to steady herself. Someone was tracking us?" she whispered. "Someone was tracking my daughter?" "That's what it appears," Captain Richardson said. "Which is why I need to ask you. Has anyone shown unusual interest in you or your family? Has anyone been following you? Have you noticed any suspicious behavior?" Sarah's mind raced back through the past weeks, months even. Had she noticed anything? She tried to remember her daily routines, her trips to the grocery store, her drives to Emma's preschool. Had she seen the same car multiple times? Had anyone been watching? Now that she was looking back, trying to remember, she couldn't quite be sure. There had been moments, small moments, when she'd felt that prickling sensation on the back of her neck, that instinctive awareness that someone was watching. But she dismissed them. She'd attributed them to her own anxiety, her own hypervigilance about keeping Emma safe. What if she'd been right to be vigilant? What if her instincts had been trying to tell her something? I don't know," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "There were times when I felt like someone was watching, but I thought it was just me being paranoid. I'm always worried about Emma's safety. I thought I was just being overly cautious." "You weren't being paranoid," Captain Richardson said quietly. "Someone has been tracking your vehicle for what we estimate to be at least 2 to 3 weeks, based on the wear patterns on the device and the battery degradation. 2 to 3 weeks. Sarah felt sick. For 2 to 3 weeks, someone had been tracking her and Emma's movements. Someone knew where they went, when they went there, how long they stayed. Someone knew Emma's schedule. Someone knew when they would be alone in the car. "Why?" Sarah asked, the word coming out as barely more than a breath. "Why would someone do this? What do they want?" "That's what we need to figure out," Captain Richardson said. "And that's why I need you to think very carefully about your answer to my next question. Is there anyone in your life, anyone at all, who might want to hurt you or your daughter, an ex-partner, someone you've had a conflict with, someone who's made threats?" Sarah shook her head. "No. I'm married to Michael. We've been together for 8 years. There's no one else. And I don't have enemies. I'm a consultant. I work from home mostly. I volunteer at Emma's school. I go to the grocery store and the park. I don't have conflicts with people." But even as she said it, she was thinking, was there anyone? Anyone at all who might have a grudge? Anyone who might want to hurt her? There was her mother, but she lived 3 states away, and they barely spoke. There were some colleagues she'd had conflicts with over the years, but nothing serious. There was someone. There's someone, Sarah said slowly. the memory surfacing like something rising from the depths of dark water. But it's probably nothing. "Tell me," Captain Richardson said. "His name is David Kessler. He was a client about a year ago. I did some consulting work for his company. He wanted to hire me for a long-term contract. But I turned him down. I wanted to focus on Emma and being a mother. He didn't take it well. He kept calling, kept trying to convince me to reconsider. Eventually, I had to be very direct with him and tell him to stop contacting me." Captain Richardson was writing this down. "And after you told him to stop contacting you?" "He did stop. I haven't heard from him in months. I assumed he'd moved on, found someone else to work with." "Do you have contact information for this David Kessler?" Sarah nodded. She still had his number in her phone, though she'd blocked it. She provided the information to Captain Richardson, who immediately radioed it in to other officers. "We'll look into him," the captain said. "In the meantime, I need to ask you about your home situation. Who has access to your driveway? Who knows where you park your car?" "Just my husband and me, really. And Emma, of course. We live in a suburban neighborhood. Our driveway is visible from the street, but it's not like it's hidden or anything. Anyone could see our car there. And this morning, the shopping center. Did you notice anyone following you? Anyone watching you or your daughter?" Sarah thought back to that morning. The drive to the shopping center, the parking lot, the shoe store, the ice cream. Had anyone been watching? Had anyone seemed out of place? There had been a man in the shoe store. She remembered him now. He'd been browsing, but he seemed to be looking at her and Emma more than at the shoes. She'd noticed it peripherally, but she'd dismissed it as just another shopper. Had it been him? Had it been David Kessler? "There was a man in the shoe store," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now, I'm not sure if it was relevant. Can you describe him?" Sarah closed her eyes, trying to picture him. Tall, dark hair, maybe in his 40s. He was wearing a dark jacket and jeans. He seemed to be watching us. But when I looked at him, he looked away. I thought maybe he was just another customer. Captain Richardson was writing all of this down. "We'll check the store's security cameras. They should have footage of everyone who was in there this morning." More police officers were arriving. The scene was becoming increasingly complex, increasingly official. Sarah could see that the shopping center had been fully evacuated. The parking lot was now essentially a crime scene, cordoned off and secured. Crime scene. The words echoed in Sarah's mind. This was a crime scene. Someone had committed a crime against her family. Someone had tracked them, monitored them, and had positioned a tracking device directly under her daughter's car seat. The implication of that last detail hit her like a punch to the gut. They had targeted Emma specifically. Not just her, not just the car, Emma. Her 3-year-old daughter. Sarah felt her stomach heave, and she barely made it to the side of the curb before she was sick, her body convulsing with the force of her fear and nausea. Officer Martinez was there immediately, placing a gentle hand on her back. "It's okay. You're going to be okay." But Sarah wasn't sure that was true. She wasn't sure that any of them would ever be okay again. When she finally sat back up, her face was wet with tears and sweat. Captain Richardson handed her a bottle of water from one of the nearby officers, and she drank it gratefully, though it didn't seem to help much. "I need to see my daughter," Sarah said, her voice hoarse. "I need to get her out of that car. She's been in there for so long. She's scared. She needs me." "We're going to get her out," Captain Richardson assured her. "But first, I need to make sure the vehicle is completely secure. The bomb detection unit is still sweeping it. Once they've cleared it, we can get Emma out safely." "How much longer?" Sarah asked desperately. "Not long. Maybe another 10 minutes. 10 minutes felt like an eternity. Sarah sat on that curb, watching her car, watching her daughter's frightened face in the window, and felt like her entire world was crumbling around her. Everything she had built, the safety, the routine, the careful control, had been an illusion. Someone had been watching them the whole time. Someone had been planning something, tracking their movements, waiting for the right moment. For what? What had David Kessler been planning? Was he planning to take Emma? Was he planning to hurt them? Sarah's mind spiraled through increasingly dark scenarios. She thought about all the terrible things she'd read about in the news over the years: kidnappings, abductions, child trafficking. She'd always thought those things happened to other people, in other places, to families who weren't as careful as hers. She'd been so wrong. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one of the bomb detection officers gave a thumbs-up signal to Captain Richardson. The vehicle had been cleared. There was no bomb. The only threat had been the tracking device itself. "Come on," Captain Richardson said, helping Sarah to her feet. "Let's get you to your daughter." They walked across the parking lot together, Sarah's legs feeling unsteady beneath her. As they approached the car, Emma's crying intensified. "Mommy, Mommy!" Sarah's hands were shaking as she opened the back door. Emma was still strapped into her car seat, her face streaked with tears, her body trembling with fear and distress. "I'm here, baby. I'm here," Sarah said, fumbling with the car seat straps. Her hands were shaking so badly that it took her 3 tries to unbuckle them. Finally, Emma was free, and Sarah pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her so tightly that she was afraid she might be hurting her. But she couldn't let go. She couldn't bring herself to release her grip on her daughter, not even for a moment. "It's okay," Sarah whispered into Emma's hair, even though she wasn't sure it was true. "It's okay. Mommy's got you. Mommy's got you." But as she held her daughter, Sarah realized that everything had changed. The world she had so carefully constructed, the safe, predictable world where she controlled every variable and eliminated every risk, had been shattered. But what Sarah didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The real danger hadn't passed. It had only just started. By the time Sarah arrived at the police station, the sun had begun its descent toward the horizon. What had started as a perfect Tuesday morning had stretched into an afternoon of chaos, fear, and uncertainty. Emma had finally fallen asleep in Sarah's arms during the drive, exhausted from crying and trauma. Captain Richardson had arranged for a family advocate to meet them at the station, a woman named Dr. Patricia Hoffman, who specialized in cases involving threats to children. She was waiting for them in a small, comfortable room that looked more like a living room than an interrogation space. There was a couch, soft lighting, and a box of tissues on the side table. "Sarah," Dr. Hoffman said, standing to greet her. She was a woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and an air of competence that was somehow both reassuring and terrifying. "I'm Dr. Hoffman. I'm going to be here to support you and Emma through this process. How are you holding up?" Sarah wanted to laugh at the question. How was she holding up? Her daughter had been tracked by a potential predator. Her sense of safety had been shattered. Her entire understanding of the world had shifted on its axis. But instead of laughing, she just shook her head. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I feel like I'm in a nightmare that I can't wake up from." "That's a very normal response to what you've experienced today," Dr. Hoffman said. "What you and Emma have been through is traumatic. but you're both safe now. We're going to do everything we can to keep you that way." A police officer brought in some juice boxes and crackers for Emma, who was still sleeping on Sarah's lap. Dr. Hoffman suggested that they let her rest for now, and instead focus on getting Sarah's full statement about David Kessler and any other relevant details. For the next 2 hours, Sarah answered questions. Where had she met David Kessler? What kind of consulting work had she done for him? What exactly had he said when she'd turned down his job offer? Had he made any threats? Had he ever mentioned Emma by name? Had he ever asked personal questions about her family? Sarah tried to remember every detail, every conversation, every interaction. But it was like trying to grasp smoke. So much of it had seemed innocuous at the time. David had been persistent, yes, but not overtly threatening. He'd been disappointed when she'd turned down his offer, but he'd seemed to accept it eventually. Or had he? Looking back now, Sarah wondered if she'd missed something. Had there been signs? Had David been planning this the whole time? "We're going to be bringing David Kessler in for questioning," Captain Richardson told her, appearing in the doorway of the comfortable room. "We have officers looking for him now. His home address is in our system, and we're checking there first. In the meantime, I want to talk to you about protective measures." Sarah looked up, her arms still wrapped protectively around her sleeping daughter. "Protective measures?" "Until we know for certain that David Kessler is the person responsible for the tracking device, and until we understand what his intentions were, we need to assume that you and Emma could be at risk. I'm recommending that you stay in a safe location. We can arrange for you to stay at a hotel with police protection, or we can station officers at your home." The thought of staying at a hotel, of being separated from her normal life, made Sarah feel even more unmoored. But the thought of going home, of returning to that house where someone had been tracking her, was even worse. "The hotel," she said. "I want to go to the hotel." "We'll arrange that," Captain Richardson said. "And I'm going to need you to call your husband and tell him what's happened. He needs to be informed, and he needs to be somewhere safe as well." Sarah nodded numbly. She'd been so focused on Emma, on the immediate crisis, that she hadn't even thought about calling Michael. What was she going to say to him? How could she explain that their daughter had been tracked by a potential predator? She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and dialed Michael's number. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, babe, how'd the shopping go?" he said, his voice warm and normal and utterly oblivious to the nightmare that had unfolded. "Michael," Sarah said, and her voice cracked on his name. "Something happened. Something really bad." There was a pause. Then, "What? What happened? Are you okay? Is Emma okay?" "We're physically okay," Sarah said, choosing her words carefully. "But someone put a tracking device on our car. Someone's been following us. The police found it this morning at the shopping center." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "What do you mean someone's been following you?" Michael's voice had changed, become sharp and alert. "Sarah, what the hell is going on?" Sarah explained everything. The police dog, the bomb detection unit, the tracking device, David Kessler. As she talked, she could hear Michael's breathing becoming heavier, his voice becoming more strained. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, I'm coming to get you. Where are you?" "Police station. They're putting us in a hotel for tonight with police protection. Captain Richardson wants to talk to you too. They're bringing David Kessler in for questioning." "David Kessler? That guy who wanted you to work for him? The one you said was weird?" "Yes," Sarah said. That one. Jesus Christ, Sarah. I knew something was off about him. I told you that when you first started working with him. He had told her that. Sarah remembered now. Michael had mentioned that David made him uncomfortable, that there was something off about the way he looked at Sarah. But Sarah had dismissed it. She thought Michael was being overprotective, that he was reading too much into a simple business relationship. She'd been wrong. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. I should have listened to you. I should have. Hey, this is not your fault, Michael said firmly. This is not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Some guy is a psycho, and that's on him, not on you. Are you safe right now? Yes. There are police here. We're going to a hotel with protection. Okay. I'm leaving work right now. I'm coming to the police station. Don't go anywhere without me. After they hung up, Sarah sat in the quiet room with her sleeping daughter and tried to process what was happening. Everything was moving so fast, everything was so chaotic, and yet she felt frozen, unable to fully comprehend the magnitude of what had occurred. Dr. Hoffman brought her a cup of tea, which Sarah accepted gratefully. The warmth of the cup in her hands was grounding, something real and present in a moment that felt surreal. You're doing really well, Dr. Hoffman said, sitting down across from her. I know this is incredibly difficult, but you're handling it with a lot of strength. I don't feel strong, Sarah said. I feel like I'm falling apart. Strength isn't about not falling apart, Dr. Hoffman said. It's about continuing to function even when you are falling apart. And you're doing that. You're taking care of your daughter. You're cooperating with the police. You're doing everything you need to do. Sarah wanted to believe her, but she wasn't sure. She felt like a failure. She was supposed to keep Emma safe. She was supposed to protect her. And instead, she'd allowed someone to track them, to monitor them, to get close enough to potentially harm them. What if I hadn't gone to the shopping center today? Sarah said quietly. What if I decided to stay home? Would he have done something? Would he have tried to take her? You can't think like that, Dr. Hoffman said gently. You can't blame yourself for not predicting what someone else might do. That way lies madness. What you can do is focus on the present moment, what we're going to do to keep you safe going forward. But Sarah couldn't help thinking about it. She couldn't help wondering what David Kessler's plan had been. Had he been waiting for the right moment? Had he been planning to take Emma? To hurt her? To do something unspeakable? The not knowing was almost worse than the knowing would have been. Michael arrived at the police station about an hour later, his face pale and his eyes wild with worry and anger. He pulled Sarah and Emma into his arms, holding them both as if he would never let go. Thank God, he whispered into Sarah's hair. Thank God you're both okay. We're okay, Sarah said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. We're okay. Captain Richardson appeared and asked to speak with both of them. He led them to a small office where he explained the situation more fully. We found David Kessler at his home about an hour ago, Captain Richardson said. He's here now, in custody, being questioned. He's denying everything. Denies knowing anything about the tracking device, denies following you, denies any wrongdoing whatsoever. Do you believe him? Michael asked, his voice hard. We're still investigating, Captain Richardson said carefully. But I will say that we found some concerning items in his home. Photographs of Sarah, photographs of Emma, maps with your home address marked on them, notes about your routines and schedules. Sarah felt her blood run cold. He had photographs of them? He had been documenting their lives. "Oh my God," she whispered. "We're going to be charging him with stalking and harassment at minimum," Captain Richardson continued. "We're still investigating to see if there's evidence of intent to commit a more serious crime. In the meantime, I want to assure you that he's in custody, and he's not going anywhere." "What about the tracking device?" Michael asked. "Where did he get it? How long has it been on our car?" "We're still analyzing it," Captain Richardson said. "But preliminary findings suggest it's been there for approximately 3 weeks. It's a sophisticated piece of equipment, the kind that requires some technical knowledge to install. We're looking into whether he has that kind of expertise, or if he got help from someone else." 3 weeks. Sarah kept coming back to that number. 3 weeks of being watched. 3 weeks of her daughter being tracked without her knowledge. "I want to know everything," Michael said, his voice cold and controlled in a way that Sarah had never heard before. "I want to know every detail of what he was planning. I want to know what he was thinking. I want to know everything." "We're working on that," Captain Richardson assured him. "The interrogation is ongoing. We have some very good detectives working on this case, and they're not going to stop until they have answers." After Captain Richardson left, Sarah and Michael sat together in that small office, holding each other and Emma between them. Michael was shaking with barely contained rage, while Sarah felt numb, hollowed out, as if someone had scooped out her insides and left only a shell behind. "We're going to get through this," Michael said, though his voice wavered slightly. "We're going to get through this, and we're going to make sure that son of a bitch pays for what he's done." Sarah wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that they would get through this, that they would emerge from this nightmare intact and whole. But looking at her daughter's sleeping face, thinking about the photographs in David Kessler's home, thinking about the 3 weeks of being watched and tracked, Sarah wasn't sure that any of them would ever be the same again. Detective Sarah Morrison interrogated David Kessler in a sterile gray room. She'd been doing this job for 23 years and could read the tells, the twitch of an eye, the tightening of a jaw. David was lying about something. "You're telling me you don't know anything about the GPS tracking device?" Detective Morrison asked calmly. "That's correct," David said. "I haven't seen Sarah in months." Detective Morrison slid a folder across the table. "We found dozens of photographs of Sarah and her daughter in your home, some taken from a distance, without her knowledge." David's jaw tightened. "I took those photographs because I cared about her. But I didn't put a tracking device on her car." "Why did you take them?" "Because I wanted to know she was okay. That her daughter was okay." Detective Morrison leaned back. "You were tracking her. You knew where she lived, worked, took her daughter to school. You had maps with her address marked." "Yes. But I didn't install the tracking device, I swear." After 23 years, Detective Morrison could tell when someone was telling the truth. And David Kessler, she realized, was telling the truth about this. "If you didn't do it," she said slowly, "then someone else did. Which means Sarah and her daughter are still in danger." David's face went pale. "There's no one else. I'm the only one who cares about her." "Then help me understand. What were your intentions?" David's voice dropped to a whisper. "I was waiting for her to realize she made a mistake. Waiting for her to come back to me." Detective Morrison felt a chill. This was the obsessive stalker, the one who believed persistence would eventually break through rejection. "How long were you planning to wait?" she asked. "As long as it took. Forever." Later that evening, Sarah sat in the hotel room watching Emma sleep. Captain Richardson knocked and entered, looking tired. "David?" "Kessler admits to the stalking and photography," he said. "But he didn't install the tracking device. It's too sophisticated for someone like him. Someone with technical expertise did this." Sarah's fear deepened. "So there's someone else?" "We're investigating," Captain Richardson said. "We're looking into David's associates and your background." After he left, Sarah scrolled through her old emails. Then she saw a name that froze her blood. Richard Stratton. 5 years ago. A project that ended badly. A man who'd threatened her. "You'll be sorry for this. You'll regret the day you decided to cross me." She'd reported it to police, but nothing came of it. She'd assumed he'd moved on. But what if he hadn't? Sarah grabbed her phone and called Captain Richardson. "Captain," she said, her voice shaking, "I think I know who installed the tracking device." Captain Richardson's office was quiet, except for the sound of fingers typing rapidly on keyboards. 2 detectives sat across from Sarah, their notepads open, their expressions serious. "Richard Stratton," Detective Morrison said, writing the name down. "Tell us everything you remember about him." Sarah took a deep breath. It had been 5 years since she'd thought about Richard Stratton, and even now, the memory of him made her skin crawl. "I met him through a mutual contact," Sarah began. "He owned a tech startup that was having organizational problems. He hired me to come in and restructure their operations, streamline their processes. It was supposed to be a 3-month project." "But it wasn't?" Detective Morrison prompted. "No. After the first month, I realized there were serious issues with the company culture. Richard was difficult. He was demanding, perfectionist to the point of obsession. He would call me at all hours with new ideas, new demands. He wanted me to work longer hours, take on more responsibility. He started asking me personal questions about my marriage, my family, my background." Michael, who was sitting beside Sarah, reached over and took her hand. His jaw was clenched. "At first, I thought he was just being friendly," Sarah continued. "But then it became clear that he had expectations. He started making comments about how we worked well together, how we understood each other in ways that other people didn't. He suggested that I should leave my consulting practice and come work for him full-time. He said we could build something great together." "And you declined?" Detective Morrison asked. "Yes. I told him I was happy with my current arrangement, that I valued my independence. I also told him that his comments were making me uncomfortable, that they were crossing professional boundaries." Sarah paused, remembering the look on Richard's face when she'd said that. The way his expression had shifted from charm to something darker, something almost predatory. "He didn't take it well," Sarah said quietly. "He became angry. He said I was ungrateful, that I didn't understand what an opportunity he was offering me. He said that I would regret turning him down, that I would spend the rest of my life wondering what I'd missed out on." "And then?" Detective Morrison leaned forward. "And then I ended the contract. I told him I couldn't continue working for him. He threatened me. He said I would be sorry, that I would regret the day I decided to cross him. Then he disappeared. I never heard from him again." Detective Morrison exchanged a glance with her partner. "Did you report the threat?" "Yes. I filed a police report. But nothing came of it. The detective I spoke with said that Richard's threats were vague enough that they didn't constitute a direct threat of violence. Without something more concrete, there wasn't much they could do." "And you haven't had any contact with him since then?" "No. Nothing. Not a phone call, not an email, nothing. I assumed he'd moved on, found someone else to work with, forgotten about me. But even as she said it, Sarah realized how naive that sounded, how foolish she'd been to assume that someone like Richard Stratton would simply move on. "We're going to need everything you have on Richard Stratton," Detective Morrison said. "Email addresses, phone numbers, home address, any information about his company, his associates, his family." "I can give you what I have," Sarah said. "But I'm not sure how current it is. That was 5 years ago." "That's okay. We'll work with what we have and see what we can find." Over the next hour, Sarah provided everything she could remember about Richard Stratton. His company had been called Stratton Technologies. It had been located in downtown, in a converted warehouse. He'd had about 20 employees, though Sarah couldn't remember most of their names. As she talked, Detective Morrison was typing information into a database, cross-referencing it with other records. Finally, she looked up, her expression grim. "We found him," she said. "Richard Stratton. He's still in the area. His company is still operating, though it's much smaller now. Looks like he scaled back significantly about 4 years ago." "4 years ago?" Sarah echoed. "That's about a year after I ended the contract with him." "Exactly," Detective Morrison said. "Which suggests that your departure may have had a significant impact on his business." Captain Richardson appeared in the doorway. "We're getting a warrant to search Richard Stratton's home and office. I want you to be prepared for what we might find. If he's the one who installed the tracking device, there could be other evidence, more photographs, more documentation, possibly more sophisticated surveillance equipment." Sarah felt sick. The idea that Richard Stratton had been tracking her for 5 years, documenting her life, waiting for... what? She didn't even know what he was waiting for. "I want to be there when you search his place," Michael said, his voice hard. "That's not advisable," Captain Richardson said. "It could compromise the investigation." "I don't care," Michael said. "That man has been stalking my wife and daughter. I want to see what he's been doing. I want to know what he's been planning." Captain Richardson and Detective Morrison exchanged a look. Finally, Captain Richardson nodded. "You can observe from a distance, but you stay back and you don't touch anything. Understood?" "Understood," Michael said. Richard Stratton's home was a modest 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. It looked like any other house on the street, well maintained, with a neat lawn and closed curtains. There was nothing about it that suggested it harbored the obsessions and plans of a dangerous man. But when the police executed the warrant and entered the house, what they found was chilling. The basement had been converted into a kind of command center. There were multiple computer monitors, filing cabinets filled with documents, and walls covered with photographs and maps. Photographs of Sarah, photographs of Emma, photographs of Michael, taken without their knowledge. There were also printouts of Sarah's calendar, her schedule, her routine. There were notes about where she went, who she met with, what she bought at the grocery store. There were utility bills, financial records, personal information that Richard Stratton had somehow obtained. And in the corner of the basement, hidden behind a filing cabinet, the police found something that made Captain Richardson's blood run cold. A detailed plan, a timeline, a series of steps that Richard Stratton had been following methodically over the past 5 years. The timeline started 5 years ago with Sarah's rejection of his job offer. It documented every contact he'd attempted with her, every threat he'd made, every way she'd rebuffed him. It showed his escalation, From simple emails and phone calls to following her, to taking photographs, to installing the tracking device. But the timeline didn't end there. It continued into the future, with dates and times and specific actions planned. Captain Richardson read through the document, his expression becoming darker with each page. The plan culminated in a date 3 weeks from now. And next to that date, written in Richard Stratton's precise handwriting, were the words, "Bring her home." Richard Stratton was arrested at his office, attempting to destroy computer files. He was read his rights and taken into custody without resistance. He seemed almost calm, almost resigned to his arrest, as if he'd been expecting it all along. In the interrogation room, Richard was a different man from David Kessler. Where David had been emotional and conflicted, Richard was cold and methodical. He answered Detective Morrison's questions with precision, never hesitating, never showing emotion. "Yes, I installed the tracking device," he admitted readily. "I've been monitoring Sarah's movements for the past 3 weeks." "Why?" Detective Morrison asked. "Because I needed to know where she was. I needed to understand her patterns, her routines. I needed to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" Richard smiled, and it was the smile of a man who believed he was smarter than everyone else in the room. "For when I brought her home." Detective Morrison felt her stomach turn. "Brought her home?" "Richard, what exactly were you planning to do?" "I was going to take her," Richard said simply. "I was going to take her away from her current life, away from her husband, away from all the people who didn't appreciate her. And I was going to show her what we could accomplish together. I was going to show her that she'd made a terrible mistake in rejecting me." "You were planning to kidnap her." "I was planning to save her," Richard corrected. "From a mediocre life with a mediocre husband, doing mediocre work for mediocre clients. I was going to give her the opportunity to be extraordinary." Detective Morrison wanted to reach across the table and strangle him. Instead, she forced herself to remain calm, to continue the interrogation in a professional manner. "And what about her daughter?" she asked carefully. "What were your plans for Emma?" For the first time, Richard's expression flickered. "Emma would stay with her father. I'm not a monster. I was only interested in Sarah." "You were interested in kidnapping a woman who had made it clear she didn't want anything to do with you. You were interested in separating her from her family. You were interested in forcing her to comply with your plans. That makes you exactly what you claim not to be." Richard's expression hardened. "You don't understand. You can't understand. Sarah and I have a connection. We understand each other in ways that other people don't. She was just afraid. She was just confused by the mediocrity of her current life. Once I removed her from that environment, once I showed her what we could accomplish together, she would understand. She would thank me." Detective Morrison closed her notebook. She'd heard enough. Richard Stratton was a classic case of delusional thinking, of obsession masquerading as love, of the complete inability to understand that other people had autonomy, had choices, had the right to reject him. He was dangerous, and he would spend a very long time in prison. Back at the hotel, Sarah received the news from Captain Richardson. Richard Stratton had confessed to the stalking, the tracking device, and the kidnapping plot. He had detailed plans for the abduction, including a safe house he'd rented under an assumed name, supplies he'd purchased, and a timeline for when he intended to take her. The date he'd chosen was exactly 3 weeks away. Sarah felt the room spin. If the police hadn't found the tracking device that morning at the shopping center, if they hadn't connected it to David Kessler, if David hadn't denied installing it, if she hadn't remembered Richard Stratton, if any one of those things hadn't happened, Richard would have taken her. He would have torn her away from her family, from her daughter, from her life. Michael held her as she cried. Not the silent tears of shock, but deep, wrenching sobs of relief and trauma, and the realization of how close they'd come to catastrophe. "It's over," Michael whispered into her hair. "It's over. He's in custody. He can't hurt you." But Sarah knew that it wasn't truly over. The fear would linger. The knowledge that someone had been watching her, documenting her life, planning to take her would stay with her for a long time, perhaps forever. The safe world she'd tried so hard to construct for her family had been shattered, and she wasn't sure she would ever be able to put it back together again.